What do you do when your nonprofit has no budget? Let's get into it. Hey y'all, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I teach people how to start their nonprofits and how to raise money from the ground up. If you need help raising money and want to join a private community of nonprofit founders learning how to raise money from me, then comment join below and I will send you a link to sign up for that community. In this video, I'm going to talk about what to do when your nonprofit has no budget. And when I say no budget, I just mean no money. What happens when your nonprofit does not have any money? What are you supposed to do? And this is part of the reason why I started doing videos on YouTube, because I was in this very situation. I was working with the nonprofit, didn't know how to make money, where the money was supposed to come from, and everything was coming from the founders' pockets. So we had to figure out how to raise money literally when there was nothing to start with beyond what was available in the founder's bank account. So I'm going to share 4 things you need to do when you don't have a budget. The first thing I want to say before we go through the 4 things is that you actually do have a budget. So when people use that wording or that phrasing where they say, well, we don't have a budget, where are we supposed to go from here? Every nonprofit has a budget. You should not be operating. You cannot operate without a budget. But people just are confused about what a budget means in a nonprofit context versus a personal context. In a personal context, in your personal life, your budget is based off what you have available, what's in your account. You budget based on how much income you make and you spend money here, here, here. On the business side or the nonprofit side, your budget is based on what your goals are for the year. So any nonprofit has a set of goals and activities that it wants to do. Well, it costs money to do that. So your budget is made up of the expenses that it will take or the expenses that you have to pay in order to accomplish the work that you want to carry out during the year. It also includes the income sources. So that's what you will make or what you will raise to cover your expenses. So before we even get into the 4 things, stop saying you don't have a budget, because you actually do. You may not know how to create your budget. You may not know where to start, but you actually do have a budget and should have a budget. So if you need help creating your first budget, I actually recorded a video on this. So I'm linking that video above because it will be really helpful for your processes. And I also have a budgeting masterclass where I include 2 budgeting templates to help you get started as well. So if you want that budgeting masterclass, you want to purchase that, comment budget masterclass below and I'll send you the link. Okay, so here are the 4 things. What do you do when you're literally starting with no money? The very first thing you need to do is look to your board. Whether you want to have a board or not, it is best practice and it is required for you to have a board of directors for your nonprofit. Now, the number of people who are on your board, who you have to make up the people on your board, that will differ greatly from nonprofit to nonprofit, but that's why I always talk about investing and finding the right people. And you're not going to find them right away, but eventually as you start doing the work and messaging what you want to do and sharing the goals that you have for your nonprofit, eventually you will find the people who will serve on your board, and they will serve on a voluntary basis and they'll be willing to show up for your nonprofit and for your mission. Now, your board should be the first source of the income that you're making or raising for your nonprofit. A lot of people, when they get started, the source of income is their own money. And I understand that's the reality, and I understand that's just what it takes to get going. But you want to, as soon as possible, start talking with the board and letting them know that it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that the nonprofit has the finances it needs. It's everyone's responsibility to ensure the financial health of the organization. And it's everyone's responsibility to give or ensure that they're enabling the organization to get financial resources. So the first place you should start is your board, and you should ask people to commit. I recommend, if you're a startup and you're new, a monthly donation, because you want some kind of cash flow. It may not be a lot of cash flow, but you want some cash flow and transactions happening in your nonprofit. So I recommend that people commit to a monthly amount, $20, $30, whatever the amount that's reasonable for the people who are working on the board. You all can decide what that is. Another reason why I like monthly giving is because if someone commits an amount for the year, then what happens when they promise to give it, but then they forget, and you're chasing them down and you're reminding them, and it gets uncomfortable because why you have to keep reminding them, right? And so if you all commit to something monthly, that's discipline. That's a practice that you have to do every month. And it's easier to talk about how to collect that and to make sure you have that in place for your organization. So the very first place you should be starting is with your board, and have everyone commit to give an amount to make sure the organization can still maintain. The second thing you need to do is get some donors. As a new nonprofit, you need to get as visible as possible. You need to work heavily on your visibility strategy, or just call it a marketing strategy. How are you going to get your nonprofit and its mission in front of as many people as possible? And while you're doing that, how are you developing relationships with those people, educating about your mission, sharing what you plan to do, sharing the impact that you hope to make, and getting those people to donate? The stronger your donor base, the stronger you are as an organization. The more individuals you have donating to your nonprofit, the more you begin to build up your infrastructure for your nonprofit. Because getting money from people for your nonprofit is the quickest way to get money for your nonprofit, right? And it's a little bit more accessible to reach people on an individual level, to talk about your work, to develop relationships with them instead of talking to an organization or talking to an agency. You're talking to a person one-to-one and developing that relationship there and asking them to give and invest in your mission. And the great thing about donations from people is that they can give and they can give again, and they can become lifetime donors. They can get their family invested. They can get their children invested in the mission. They can get their neighbors and their mom and their dad and their coworkers and all those people invested and engaged in the process. So part of your strategy for raising money from the beginning should absolutely be to find individual donors who can support your mission. And another reason why I tell people to do this is because you've got to get your message down. It's really important for you to come up with a compelling message and learn how to use storytelling and the tactics you need to get people to get behind you. Right? You're going to have to perfect that as you go along, because that's the key. That's the core of what you need to do as a nonprofit founder or executive director. You got to convince people that the mission is worthy to support. So the best way to get your chops up and to get used to doing that is to talk to people, reach out to people, develop relationships, ask for money, right? And the more you do that, the better you get at that. So have a strategy to reach out and find donors. One of the best strategies you can use to get a bunch of donors in the beginning is a peer-to-peer fundraising strategy. I talk about it in the video that I'm linking above, but I also have a workbook which lays out the full strategy of what you can use from top to bottom, start to finish, of how to execute your own peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. So if you need that workbook, just comment peer-to-peer workbook below and I will send you the link. The third thing you need to do is to start pursuing smaller grants. When you are looking for grants for your nonprofit, first of all, make sure that's not the only source of money that you're pursuing for your nonprofit. That's number one. But number two, because you probably have a smaller budget, it's probably not over $50,000 or over $100,000, then you're not going to be pursuing a $1 million grant. Like, a funder is not going to give you $1 million if your budget is $50,000. It just doesn't work like that. So you got to start building the momentum first and pursuing smaller opportunities and build on top of those and build and stack until you can reach and get your budget higher to start asking for higher amounts in your grant proposals. So look for small community regional funders. Look for those funders who give in your region, give in your geographic area, give to organizations of your size or smaller. Look for those kinds of grants. Don't waste your time, or don't prioritize. Let me say that. Don't prioritize the bigger grants. Prioritize the smaller, more locally based grants first. If you watch any of my videos on grants, and there's just one I'm linking above, you hear me say this over and over again because it works. So check out your local community foundation. Every community has a community foundation. Check out the local stores in your area, the local brands in your area, because they all give money. Your banks, your grocery stores, your utility companies, they all give money. And here's one grant everybody should try to consider, which is a Walmart grant. and they give between $250 to $2,500. It just depends on the store, but you can go to every store and ask the manager to apply for the grant, and they can decide whether or not they want to award a grant. So if you want to get your chops up and want to get some grant funding, start with the Walmart grant. Now, as the years have gone by, and I've been doing this for a while, the process for getting a Walmart grant has changed. So what I really recommend you do is to check out the Walmart community grant and look at the latest instructions. I can't tell you the latest instructions because it changes so much, but look up the latest instructions to be verified in order to apply for a Walmart grant. And if you have questions or you're just curious about it, literally walk into your local Walmart store, ask for the manager, and ask. They all can provide grants to local community organizations. And finally, this is what I would do to start pursuing more money for my nonprofit. I would start preparing myself for conversations with major donors. So major donors, that term is relative because a major donor to a small organization may be $5,000, but a major donor to another organization may be $1 million. So it really is relative to your size and your history, but you need to start thinking about who in your circle or who you can get to know that can give substantial amounts of money. I love grassroots fundraising and I believe in grassroots fundraising. I believe that for a lot of you guys, you are very close to your community or you've experienced the same thing that you're trying to do with your nonprofit. And so it makes a lot of sense to get support from the people who look like you, who live in your community, who have like experiences as you. And grassroots fundraising like that, like within your community, can be very powerful. But a lot of times when you're doing grassroots fundraising or you're approaching it that way, then the donations tend to be smaller amounts. Like when you do peer-to-peer fundraising strategies, the donations tend to be $100 or less for the most part. You know, on average, your donation amounts are that. And that's great, but that means you have to get a bunch of donors if you want to get a lot of money for your nonprofit. So at some point, you have to start thinking about who else you can attract to your organization as donors who can give substantially more. And you need to start thinking about other organizations that receive large donations, who are their major funders, who invests in them, and start talking to those folks. You need to start thinking about who has shown interest in the kind of work that you do, who has some kind of alignment with your mission. This could be an individual, it could be a business, right? I want you to start thinking about who is invested in your geographic area or who is invested in your target population. Maybe there's someone who really enjoys giving to kids' causes or causes that support youth mentoring and things like that, or maybe someone's interested in sports. You really need to start thinking about where those alignments are and start developing relationships with those people, reaching out to those folks, asking questions about what they like to give to and how you can partner together to be able to scale up to get the money that you need. One thing I would recommend is that you reach out to your local community foundation, because not only do they give grants or they have grant opportunities available, they also manage portfolios for people who have money to give. And they can recommend who you may want to talk to, who may be interested in your mission or interested in the work that you do. There's a thing called a donor advised fund, where people basically, in the simplest terms ever, they store their money in a fund and they can get the tax benefit without actually giving it to a nonprofit yet. So it's like stored up somewhere, and at any moment they can make a recommendation for it to go to a nonprofit, but they don't have to give right away. So there are all these different options for people who are looking to support nonprofits, but it takes you being willing to find those people, develop those relationships, and start having those conversations with folks to convince them to give and for them to become invested in the work that you do, but also for you to develop real relationships with them so they can see the work that you're doing in real time. Give them the plans, give them the data, share what you're trying to do, and you all work together to invest in the people that you want to help and the people whose lives you want to change. So I hope this information was helpful. If you need help with your nonprofit, don't forget to visit me at bossonabudget.com. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.